Dr. Bikman's lab. Cancer and sepsis from low LDL. LDL and HDL together protect our body from leaky gut.
LDL, we know very readily, is a product from the liver. And so while the liver is the first one exposed to LPS before it would then move throughout the rest of the blood, the liver is at the same time producing LDL. And again, we classically think of LDL as just being a problem in promoting atherosclerotic plaques. That is extremely debatable. What is much less debatable, because the data are so clear, is the fact that LDL, this lipoprotein carrying these fats, also has on it, like HDL, specific what's called LPS binding proteins, or LBP. So there are these binding proteins that I mentioned earlier, without giving them a name, that are going to lock in the LPS and then take it to the liver, and then the liver will process it and excrete it through the bile duct into the intestines to be eliminated from the body. So and this is a study entitled Lipopolysaccharide is cleared from the circulation by hepatocytes via the low-density lipoprotein receptor. And they did this study in rodents by manipulating the LDL receptors. This was published in the journal PLOS ONE in 2016. So direct evidence and many, many other studies finding that LDL will bind LPS. So while you are eating a diet that might be high in saturated fats, and people will claim that's increasing inflammation without evidence. In fact, there are studies from Volek and Finney showing that inflammation goes down, but you have LDL levels going up, and that might be potentially improving the overall inflammatory profile in the body. We're talking about leaky gut, seeing it through the lens of LPS, this very primary leaky molecule that is moving and then offending the body. And LDL and HDL act as saviors in a way by physically binding this leaked molecule and then putting it back where it belongs, back into the guts, but at a point where it no longer has the ability to get back, absorbed back into the body. The final study I wanted to mention in highlighting LDL's role as an immune regulator was published in 2007, so this is a little older, and it's published in the Annals of Clinical Laboratory Science. The lead author, last name is Shore, S-H-O-R, and the title of the study is Low Serum LDL Cholesterol Levels and the Risk of Fever, Sepsis, and Malignancy. They divided the study subjects into two groups: people with low LDL, which they considered at lower than 70 milligrams per deciliter, which is on the low end of healthy. But of course, a lot of physicians would say that's wonderful. Clinical markers would say, oh, your LDL is great, it's so low. And then the high was above 70, which I don't think is very high at all. But nevertheless, the group with low LDL demonstrated increased odds of hematological cancer, so like leukemia, by more than 15-fold. Now, let me just pause there for just 1 second. 15 times. So people with low LDL levels were 15 times more likely to have a blood-based cancer. It might be relevant that LDL is part of the immune system, and maybe a sufficient LDL helps to stop this before it ever becomes a substantial problem. That's enormous speculation. Low LDL levels also increase the odds of fever and sepsis. Sepsis is a severe infection. This is when a person typically has to go to the hospital. So septic shock is part of this. So sepsis is a very, very bad infection. Of course, if you have a compromised immune system, that's going to happen much more readily. And indeed, the odds were 5 times. Again, that's a real number. People with low LDL were 5 times more likely to have serious infections known as sepsis. Leaky gut is real. One of the main offending agents is a part of a bacteria called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. It passes from the guts into the blood, promoting inflammation throughout the body, also promoting insulin resistance. Fructose is known to enhance that movement or enhance the leakiness of the gut. Polyunsaturated fats are known to enhance leakiness. In contrast, saturated fats, there's evidence to show that they might in fact be attempting to resolve that or improve the integrity of the guts. Once LPS has made it into the blood, the body has built-in molecules to try to bind and remove the LPS before it can create these systemic problems. And this comes in the form of the oft-reviled LDL and the oft-championed HDL. Regardless, in addition to moving lipids around the body, which is how we typically think of these, LDL and HDL, they clearly have immune roles. And one of them is the binding and the removal of LPS from the body.
LDL is a product from the liver. So while the liver is first exposed to LPS, lipopolysaccharide, before it moves into the bloodstream, the liver also produces LDL. Now, Dr. Bikman explains it's extremely debatable if LDL really is bad. What is clear from the data, LDL is a lipoprotein carrying fats in the bloodstream. Also, it carries LBP, which is LPS binding proteins. These LBP lock in the LPS so it does no harm. It takes it to the liver. It's excreted through the bile duct into the intestines to be eliminated. A study from 2016 and in many, many more, the finding is LDL binds the LPS so it can do no harm. So, if you're eating a diet high in saturated fat, studies show it reduces inflammation. LDL goes up, improving your inflammatory profile. LDL and HDL act as saviors defending the body, physically binding the leaked molecule LPS, returning it to the gut in a form that won't allow it to escape again. In another study, 2007, in the Annals of Clinical Laboratory Science, two groups, low LDL, below 70 milligrams per deciliter, and high LDL, greater than 70 milligrams per deciliter. The results? In the low group, low LDL increased the odds versus hematological cancer by 15 times. Dr. Bikman says people with low LDL were 15 times more likely to get blood-based cancer. Further results, low LDL also increased the odds of fever and sepsis. Sepsis is a severe infection, such as septic shock, requiring hospitalization. These odds were increased by 5 times. In summary, leaky gut is real. The main offending agent is the bacteria LPS. It passes from the gut into the blood, spreading inflammation and insulin resistance. Fructose enhances this movement. Polyunsaturated fats enhance this movement. Saturated fats improve gut integrity. Once LPS has made it into the blood, the body has built-in molecules to bind and remove LPS. These molecules are LDL and HDL. And by the way, these are increased with saturated fat in the diet. He concludes, LDL and HDL have a clear immune role, binding LPS and removing it so no harm is done. Annotated and summarized, easy to share with loved ones. The description below the title for this video has these summary points.